Welcome to Spiritual Dessert Trews, episode 104 for Russell Brand and other people. I'm really proud of you, Russell Brand. Today's a very special day, extremely special. It's 12/13/14, the infamous December 13th, 2014, which means it's been 12 years of clean and sober. Yay! I'm so proud, so very proud. Today we are reading from the book called The Compatibility Gene, Sex and Smelly T Shirts. How's that for science? It's really the premise that we have a certain scent that holds us kindred. If you smell it, which you wouldn't smell it, that means you're kindred. But if you do smell something foreign, that means it's not kindred. Here goes. Medawar's experiments in transplantation showed that our bodies can distinguish our own cells from those of other people through differences in compatibility genes. At the time, everyone was in agreement that these genes could not have evolved merely to make transplantation difficult because it's such an unnatural situation. Foremost function of these genes, as discovered later, is in the immune system. But the ability of these genes to cause problems in transplantation may not be so far removed from one of their real roles after all, because these genes could indeed mark our identity, the influence, interpersonal compatibility through our sense of smell. Rimmel begins his bestseller, The Book of Perfumes, from 1864, 5 years after Darwin's On the Origin of the Species. Among the many enjoyments provided for us by bountiful nature, there are few more delicate, at the same time more keen than those derived from the sense of smell. Yet around 150 years later, while the details of Darwinian evolution have been mined extensively, we understand little about smell. Luca Turin, a scientist and perfumer, reveals in his popular book published in 2006, The Secret of Scent. The secret is this: though we now know almost everything there is to know about molecules, we don't know how our nose reads them. An unofficial analysis of one perfume, Beyond Paradise from Estee Lauder, revealed that it contained about 400 different molecules. We knew something about how our nose detects those chemicals, using thousands of specialized receptors which take up around 3% of the human genome, but we understand precious little about how our brain uses that information to give us the perception of a smell, and in turn subconsciously or consciously influence our behavior. Turin suggests that there's been little investment for research into smell because the practical benefit isn't as obvious as to, say, medicine, technology. There's been far more research, Turin says, to understand our senses of vision and hearing because they're considered more important, life being so much more worse if you lose them. My own view is that we understand very little about smell because it's just so difficult to study. Colors can be characterized by wavelengths of light. Shapes can be represented by mathematical equations. Sound is stored in digital form in every download. But how do you describe the smell of, say, vanilla? We don't even have the language to depict a smell in the way that a visual picture, for example, is easily described, and writers portray smells in metaphors or analogies. Certainly can't calculate how any molecule smells. Computers can't predict a perfect smelling concoction of molecules, and perfumes are made by experts literally just following their nose. They're winging it. We have an unusual sense of smell in my family. My grandfather could smell someone coming in a room from far away in the front of the house. Or if someone sweat, he smelled it and complained. It seems that I have my grandfather's sense of smell. So when things are good, they're really good. And my little nephew, the same family trait. So I was a food taster for a while, for a long while. But being a vegan, you can't be a food taster. I'm tasting all right. Lots of healthy food. Our life has so many different twists and turns. We don't even have a language to depict a smell in the way the visual picture, for example, is easily described. Most problematic of all for the science of smell, human responses to smells can only be assessed with woolly scoring systems that are hard to interpret ambiguously. And as we will see, this causes huge controversy. In 1994, undeterred by these problems in studying smell, Klaus Wedekind, a Swiss zoologist then working at the University of Bern, Switzerland, set up a fascinating experiment. He asked women to rank men's T-shirts as to how sexy or pleasant they smell, aiming to find out whether or not their preferences corresponded to how similar or dissimilar compatibility genes were between the men wearing the T-shirts and the women smelling them. Wedekind didn't arrive at this experiment with any background in immunology. Instead, he had been thinking about how animals and people assess potential mates, as in how female peacocks assess the display of the male's feathers. He had been studying bumps called tubercles, found on male fish, thought to indicate an individual's breeding fitness to females, exactly like the peacock feathers. He realized that it wasn't clear what the female fish were assessing about tubercles, their number or size, for example, and most importantly, what was actually being indicated. He also realized, as others did, that the system seemed like it could be open to cheating. Animals could display a desirable trait, like many huge tubercles, or beautiful feathers, without having any qualities that females could actually benefit from. They could be faking it. To this study, Wedekind used a mathematical simulation of what would happen if males cheated and predicted situations in which honesty would win out in the long term. It does. The bottom line was that cheaters wouldn't win, as long as genes that directly influence survival could be sensed with little effort. He then read about research indicating that mice could sense each other's immune system genes by smell, which seemed to fit his theoretical ideas of how mate selection should work. Although the idea that compatibility genes can be distinguishing mark of our individuality goes right back to Peter discovering in 1950's memoir, never entertained the possibility that humans or animals could actually sense an individual's compatibility genes. It took until the early 1970s for this idea to be taken seriously, when Jeanette Boise at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York happened to notice that mice she was breeding seemed to prefer to mate with specific other mice. The husband and wife team wondered if these preferences might correlate with compatibility genes. Lewis Thomas, a well-known scientist and prominent essayist of the time who headed the New York Institute where the Boises worked, theoretically considered that compatibility genes would give individuals a particular scent. In his essay, A Fear of Phermones, published in 1974 collection Lives of the Cell, he explicitly questioned whether or not dogs may be able to sniff out humans according to their compatibility genes. Actually, we still don't really know the answer to that. Dogs have 60 times as much smell receptors as humans, and some can reportedly detect the scent of a person from a week-old fingerprint. But we now know about how this works. Thomas came to this idea not by directly observing the mating preferences of mice, but in thinking about disparate observations made by others in the early 1970s. One rather bizarre source of inspiration was the tale of a loner living on an island who made the discovery that by taking the dry weight of the hairs trapped by his electric razor, how did he find that out? Every day that his beard grew much more rapidly each time he returned to the mainland and encountered girls. Thomas took the antidote, published anonymously, in evidence that we are affected by the presence of others in subtle ways. On that note, pleasant dreams to be continued. Nighty-night. Yes, yes. Now I know why your T-shirt didn't smell like anything. We're related.